Good morning, children, and welcome back to the last session of your English class. Before we move ahead, let's revisit what we learned in our previous class. In the last session, we dealt with the brief introduction of the poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, and what led the poet Alfred Lord Tennyson to write this poem. We also dealt with the reading of the first three stanzas along with their detailed explanation. So children, let's come to page number 30 of your textbook and read out the remaining part of the poem and look for their explanation. Stanza 4, page 30. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered. Children, let's see, what does these lines mean? Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air. The soldiers took out their sabres bare. Sabres refers to the heavy swords with curved blades to fight the enemies. Sabring the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered. In spite of having heavy swords, the Light Brigade fought with the gunners bravely and killed them. The whole world wondered as they dared to fight with light weapons while their enemies were heavily armed with guns and cannons. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke. Children, plunged means to push or move ahead quickly. So here the poet says that the soldiers crossed the borderline and moved ahead bravely towards the artillery of the enemy through the dense smoke of shellings. The soldiers fought bravely and killed the enemies, that is the Cossack and Russians, reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Their attacks were so fierce that the enemies trembled with fear and were torn apart to death. The ranks of the Russian soldiers were broken due to the attacks of the British. Then they rode back, but not the 600. After attacking the enemies, the soldiers returned back, but according to Lord Tennyson, they were not 600, as many of them died. The poet here mourns for the fatal death of the gallant soldiers. Children, now let's read the fifth stanza of the poem. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. Children, the first 5 lines of the stanzas are repeated earlier in stanza 3. These lines describe the war zone in which the soldiers were trapped. Cannons on both sides and behind of the soldiers now assaulted them with shots and shells. The battlefield was surrounded by the sounds of firing from the guns and cannons, like that of thunder. While horse and hero fell, they that had fought so well. Many of the heroes, that is, the soldiers, died along with their horses, but they fought extremely well. Came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. As the brigade rode back from the mouth of hell, soldiers and horses collapsed, and a few remained to make the journey back. These lines describes the aftermath, that is, the result or consequences of the battle. Children, now let's read the last stanza of the poem and find out what does the poet want to convey through it. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made! All the world wondered, Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade, Noble 600. The poet Alfred Lord Tennyson uses a rhetorical question. Rhetorical question refers to a question for which no answer is expected. At the beginning of this stanza, when can their glory fade? After the 5 previous stanzas, the answer to this question is clear, that the glory of the soldiers should not fade, as their sacrifice is symbolic of all those who sacrifice their lives for the sake of their country. Their glory and glorious deeds, that is, the wild charge or brave attacks they made, will always be remembered by the Britishers. The world marveled at the courage of the soldiers. Indeed, their glory is undying. The poem states, these noble 600 men remain worthy of honor and tribute today. So, dear children, here we read a remarkable poem of warfare, which is both courageous as well as tragic. The poet has used various poetic devices in this poem which made it worth reading. Children, let's summarize the poem. The Charge of the Light Brigade is written in the third person. It relates a dramatic version of events of a key battle in the Crimean War. The events had been reported in the press 6 weeks before Tennyson's version appeared. On 25th of October 1854, a lightly armored cavalry unit received a garbled message to attack the Russian forces. Although they knew they were doomed, as the Russians had guns against the cavalry, sabers, the brigade did as they had been told and attacked. Out of the 600 men, 271 were casualties, injured, captured, or killed. The misunderstanding in the commands is mentioned in the second stanza, but only briefly. The soldiers only know that it is their duty to do and die. The field of battle is referred to as the Valley of Death, referencing Psalm 23 of the Bible. This gives the battle a serious but almost religious tone. The sounds and actions of the battle are related in a series of strong verbs. The cannon volleyed and thundered, and the men were stormed at with shot. The sibilance here reminds us of the sounds of the bullets flying through the air, while these men only had sabers to advance with. Their advance is portrayed as brave and noble. The valley is described in terms of monsters with the jaws of death and the mouth of hell. The men reaching the opposing forces and are sabering and charging and plunged in the battery smoke. Even though they are so few, the enemy reeled from the saber stroke, showing that the British forces fought well and were aggressive attackers. While the battle is relayed here to the reader, it is second-hand and heavily edited. The poet focuses on how heroic the soldiers were, and at the end of the poem asks that we honor the charge they made and consider when can their glory fade. He clearly wishes us to see the sacrifice the soldiers made as a noble one. So children, here we covered the entire poem. The question answers and exercises are shared on your WhatsApp groups as well as on Google Classroom. So take care, stay strong, stay safe. Thank you.